Hi everybody, Lena here from Tarot Down Under. Well, at the moment, the world's gaze is on the UK, so I thought I'll come on and have a look at what's happening with Yeti 2, Boris Johnson. Won't be there long, I can assure you of that, viewers. He'll have barely unpacked, but what form will that take? But first, indulge me a minute. I'll try and give you a 1-minute version of where Brexit's up to now. Okay, so 2016, big year. While Trump was wearing his hat made in China and telling everyone, make America great again, the same conversation was started by the same people, i.e. the Mercers via Cambridge Analytica, in the UK. Put the great back in Great Britain. Why do we need the EU? We had a great empire, we can do it again. No one had a plan, so there's several things that these two hideous phenomena have had in common. The first is Cambridge Analytica. The second is by doing Brexit and by having Trump, both were designed to break the Western Alliance, NATO. Who's the beneficiary of that arrangement? Putin, which is why he felt emboldened to do what he did in Crimea, Ukraine, etc., because he knew all the focus was elsewhere. So, a very narrow vote in the referendum pushed the Brexit vote. As I said, no one had a plan post-Trump and no one had a plan for Brexit. So for 3 years, Theresa May, who herself wanted to stay in the EU, but because she's a fundamentally decent person, she had a delegation of 100-odd people negotiating how to get a deal from the EU once they separated. Everything she suggested was voted down. So these same, forgive me for the language, viewers, these same bastards that voted no to every concession she managed to get from the EU, now it's 5 minutes to midnight, they're in big trouble. They are in big trouble because they have no plan. Boris Johnson said today he'd rather be dead in a ditch than not do a no-deal Brexit on the 31st of October. So it's like saying we're going to stop trading with everyone in 6 weeks' time. We don't know what's going to happen, but that's okay. We'll be Brits. Awesome. It's not a plan. It's a terrifying strategy that's going to impoverish the country. It's just craziness. And again, they appealed to this sort of latent patriotism everywhere that's not founded on anything very real in the modern world. Right, so Johnson's only been in for, I think, technically a few weeks, but he only took over the reins a week ago. And suddenly, these same people who voted no to Theresa May have realised their folly, and they've joined together. This is unprecedented. You had Conservatives joining with what they call over there the Lib Dems, plus the Labour Party, who all went in to stop a no Brexit. They should have done this 2 years ago, but anyway, they managed to do it in the last 2 days. He is looking at an exit either way. Now, in the British system, like the Australian system, which is the British system with a tweak, we have what we call a vote of no confidence. It's a safeguard if you end up with a belligerent nutcase at the helm, you can actually, not the people, but the Parliament votes no confidence in their leadership. On the one hand, this can be a good thing. On the other hand, it can be abused. So I'm not saying it's magic. But he's certainly looking at a no confidence vote. Okay, so let's have a look First of all at Boris Johnson, then at the UK, more generally. Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson. Okay. I'm using the Toff deck. Why not? He gets the Knight of Cups, Queen of Cups, the Prince of Discs, the Hanged Man. It might be more than symbolic in this case. Three of Wands, Power, and the Wheel of Fortune. It's all yet to be revealed. So, his signifier, his main card, the Knight of Cups. This was his opportunity to milk this idea of we're Brits, we're proud, let's stop all these immigrants coming in and be British again. That was his message, and it was enough to get them in there. The Queen of Cups, I think this was Theresa May. She had a couple of years doing her best. I always thought it was a mistake, I have to say, because the Brexiteers didn't know what they were doing and had no fallback position. She should have said, no, I don't want to be your Prime Minister. Put someone who supports Brexit in and let them get a deal. But she didn't. So that's her. I think the Queen of Cups trying to emotionally hold the country together, to respect the referendum, to try and get the best deal. But let's face it, there was a gender issue here. These conservative men who all went to the same two schools, or three schools, including Boris, just went, no, you know, silly woman, we'd get a better deal. What can you say? Then in comes Boris. This is his reading. Naked power. Yes, taking the bull by the horns, literally. The momentum of Brexit would carry him through. But people didn't realise how power-hungry he was, because he's been on the international stage for 30 or 40 years, unlike Trump, who was in real estate land, and Trump, who never travelled. He made his way from Queens to Manhattan, you know. Boris was always comfortable in the European sphere, but people didn't think he'd be as fascist as he was on arrival. So his first act was to suspend Parliament, which is like suspending Congress. It's just radical and out there. And people said, no, that was the second vote he lost. So he's lost two major votes in his week actively as Prime Minister. He's now basically crucified. He can't go anywhere with this. Three of Wands, business and trade over the water. There are no deals. Also, you've got to remember the EU, which has been around for 40 years, they want to make an example of Britain because they don't want other countries pulling out. So they're not going to make it easy for Britain. And this is the rock on which they will perish, which is trade. Then this will be a last-ditch power play. Now, viewers, I must tell you, before I finish Boris's section, I did a joint reading with Violetta, so if you haven't seen it, I will put it up on this video. We covered some of this stuff, and there are some interesting revelations in it. It's worth checking out. Okay, so this is the naked power play. This is a 4, and 4 can be, you know, solidity and building foundations and all of that. But I don't see it in this context like that. I see it as 4 countries, well, four power blocks, which is the UK, the EU, China and Russia. Power. That's how I see that card. Wheel of Fortune. It is karmically destined for all the same reasons. Now, the reason the referendum, even though it was narrow, got in, just like Trump, was because of the people who didn't vote. And a lot of young people didn't vote. So apart from the Electoral College, which basically should be outlawed as a terrorist organisation, I think things are not going to be right in America until you get rid of the Electoral College. Oh, Hillary got 3 million votes more than Trump, but they don't matter apparently. So that system is outdated and wrong. Okay, the point being, this is a karmic lesson for the West generally, because we're doing a miniature version in Australia of all this ugly stuff, right? We've failed as humans, basically, in the last 30 or 40 years to address the issues of wealth inequality, climate change, all these issues. We've kept missing opportunities to do things, right? So that's why it had to get this bad in America. It had to get this bad in the UK for people to actually become engaged and to realise the origins of the word politics is polis, the people, right? You know, duh. They actually work for you guys. Instead, they've flipped it around in the power plays, and everyone is sort of scared of losing their job, so they don't criticise their bosses or their organisation or the bad conditions. And people have been just battered down over time and with stress about money and security. This should be security and isn't. His fate is there, right? So let's just do a little clarifier on Yeti 2's personal fate. This is Boris Johnson personally. He gets the Hangman and the Wheel of Fortune. Well, what's the clarifier for Boris? He gets the Seven of Cups. The man is deluded. He's a bit like Trump in the sense that people thought he wouldn't be a marvellous president, but he would just, Trump this is, would just let people do their jobs that they'd always done a Reagan, I guess, you know, just be the face of the party, prattle on, but business as usual. This was the illusion. And it's the same in the UK. We can just leave the EU and it'll be okay. No, it won't, Boris. I'm sorry, it won't. So he will quietly perish. Not quietly. It's on a major world stage. So let's see now. The poor old UK, like poor old America, but let's see. Are they going to have a general election? Who'll win it? The Labor Party, which is the equivalent of your Dems, is led by Jeremy Corbyn. He's not that popular. So let's have a look at the UK generally. What's the vibe in the UK? Oh, isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing? The Power card and the Wheel of Fortune. I'm not going to pull more on that. That's just incredible. People have to realise they have more power than they feel they have. This is about people power. Just speaking of people power for a minute, Hong Kong, the protesters have kept coming out. And I read an interesting article, I think it was Newsweek or something, And the image they use with each other is, rather than be a wall of resistance when you're taking on the state of China, be like water, melt away. So what they do on social media is they can get people in large numbers really quickly, but to a number of designated sites, so the police are spread over more areas. They have people one row back from the front line wearing gas masks, and when the gas canisters are thrown at them, it's their job to go forward, put a cone, a plastic cone over the device and pour water in it. They're protected by the mask. The idea is to move around these things rather than head on. And I just thought that's a different way of doing it. So, before I go, I do have to comment. There's something that Moscow Mitch has done, which I find entertaining, could be the wrong word, but I do. Since Joe Scarborough gave him that nickname, he's been sunk, Mitch McConnell. But he's a Scorpio. I don't mean Scorpio in star signs. He's like a scorpion. The tail, watch the thing in the tail. So what he very cleverly did last week about the gun laws, after yet another massacre on the streets of an allegedly civilised country, he said, and he's famous for not putting anything forward to vote on, he said, I'll put gun control legislation forward when the president has signed off on it. Now that is very smart and very vicious, because it means he's nailed Trump's feet to the floor. What is the Yeti going to do? So Mitch McConnell has tied gun control to Trump. I don't know if Trump even caught up with that himself last week, because he was so busy, admiring his portfolios and sinking golf clubs. So we'll see. But you think about that. Mitch McConnell has said, sure, I'll put it up as soon as he puts his name to it. Ooh, I have to read on that separately. Got to go so I can get this to you and get the link to the joint reading with Psychic Violetta. Some of you will have already found it, I'm sure, but I'll put it up for you. Okay, take care. Be strong. Stay sane in the face of the madness. See you soon.